Sometimes it's hard to grasp how long a 2.1 kilometer long Highline is, and to imagine even walking across a 1-inch bridge that spans the gap. But a lot of films are made about the ooh and the ah of the actual walk of such a large Highline. What goes into getting that set up and the logistics of the planning, the prepping, and overcoming of all the obstacles that inevitably come from trying to rig what is the world record. So let's tell the story of how this line got set up. Hi, I'm Ryan Jinks, and I love finding the limitations of gear. And when we break gear on this channel, usually there's a 3 or a 5 to 1 safety ratio, meaning the gear is 3 or 5 times stronger than the force we're actually putting on it in real life. And usually the conclusion is super good enough at the end of almost every video. I enjoy finding the absolute limitations of gear because occasionally we actually do push the limits of gear. This is a story of us rigging a 2.1 kilometer between the mountains Lapporten in Abisko, Sweden. That is 1.3 miles long. The logistics of that become exponentially more complex the longer it gets. And we are going to dive into the details of the planning, the preparation, the complexity of rigging such a hard line, and the complications that we encountered naturally trying to do something that is now the world record. So this story starts years prior to when David dreamed of rigging a Highline in the most amazing mountains in Sweden. And I'm going to tell in this video my story of from the moment I was invited into the project to us hiking up to the anchor I was a part of and all the issues we had at our anchor and the logistics from our side. Because, well, it's a big Highline and I never went to the other side. It is fascinating how complicated it is when you cannot physically hold on to the webbing. And the real risk, once the line is set up, is if the wind picks up, which it is an extremely windy place, there is no plan B if the line is violently shaking. Now let me paint you a picture of the logistics we are dealing with. So let's back up to 2019 when I was a part of the Asbestos 2.0 kilometer long world record Highline. That was pretty much in town and it was a mine, so there was a road that went to the backside and you could drive to the other side and you could take turns monitoring that anchor, and we had over a 30-person team. That project ended up being quite difficult to set up, as any 2.0 kilometer long Highline naturally would be. But in the Lapporten Mountains, you are 8 miles or 13 kilometers away from town and you have to hike up there. But we were fortunate enough to have a helicopter fly our gear to the top of both sides, so the logistics seem feasible. But once the helicopter drops our stuff off and helps finish getting the tagline across, we're left all to ourselves to make this thing happen without being able to run to the store. So in our Zoom meeting, I realized that we didn't have a really solid plan on how we are going to release the webbing as we winch it across the sky with our Dyneema rope and our spool that we are going to connect to a capstan winch and basically winch the webbing over. But you cannot hang on to 2.1 plus kilometers worth of webbing because there's sag in the middle, so the actual length of the webbing's longer than the direct gap if there was a 180-degree line split across the sky. So in order to release webbing safely, you have to have what is called a Z-drag, where the webbing basically goes back and forth between basically some points of friction. In the past, I've used large carabiners, but you have to it really helps if you have like some trees to zigzag between. There's no trees up here. And so we kind of had to come up with some options. So I explored the idea of using the hang frame or the wooden structure that holds up the master point of the Highline in order to keep it off the rocks, easier to tension, easier to get on and off of, and try to build a Z-drag inside of this hang frame. Well, it cockeyes it really badly, and it didn't quite work the way we thought in our tests at home. Now, the number one advice I could give to anybody doing anything that pushes the limits of what they're used to is practice at home. It can save you a lot of work. And because we didn't have a solution and realized we needed one, someone from our team came up with what is more or less like a sea serpent of pipes that we were able to run the webbing through and mount to the ground on either end. So we have our winch figured out, we've got our Z-drag figured out. We just have to get our 4+ kilometers of webbing taped together, because there is a main and a backup that you tape, and every 50 meters there's a sew-in loop that you connect with different methods, in this case soft shackles and quick links, and then you have another 50 meters and so on and so forth. So that adds up to over 40 sections that you have to make sure are perfect, because if you have 50 meters that are not correct, it can be almost impossible to walk if you don't have those backup loops. And in case you don't highline and you just find this stuff fascinating, the loopy webbing underneath the thing you're walking on is a backup in case the main line were to magically break.
Whoa! Whoa, it almost hit the ground!
However, it also really helps dampen the energy that comes from you wiggling, and if you've ever stepped on a slack line, you know it'll wiggle back at you. Well, those backup loops really dampen them, so they're very, very important to successfully walk the high line, not just from a safety perspective. And the reason we have a connection every 50 meters is in case the main line breaks, it doesn't break for 2 kilometers, making you drop 300 meters before the backup catches you, because the backup is loose. But you will only drop 10 meters or maybe around 30 feet if a 50-meter section breaks. And it is considered a lot safer to have segmented high lines. So we planned as good as any slackline group can plan, and we finally start to pull the trigger for this project. I fly to Stockholm, Sweden, I meet some of the crew, and we jump in some Volkswagen vans that basically sponsored our project by providing some vans for us to drive all the way to northern Sweden. Very, very northern Sweden. The sun, by the way, never sets up there. And I brought 2 headlamps and no eye covers. And before we rendezvoused as an entire group at our first destination or camp spot, we stopped by the lumber store. Pretty much the last lumber store anywhere north of where we were going. And we got there about 1 minute before they closed.
German machine.
Check, see if your math is right.
Nope.
So how many years have you been an engineer?
I got that on eBay. You really think I'm an engineer?
Yeah. Two rights make a wrong. 2 wrongs make a right.
Yeah.
Or it's a professional rigging team. Instead of driving there like we were planning, we're planning on driving there soon. So then we rendezvous at our camp spot, and David had some exciting news for us.
The helicopter people saying that our agreement about pulling the tagline is off because they have been running it through the organization, and now apparently there is a permit that they need and they will not be able to get, and it's end of discussion. They're nice, and they still want to drop our gear up there, so that's good, but they're not going to pull the tagline.
So before we go to bed, we make sure that we have our winch and our hang frames all situated, because as soon as we get to Abisko, we got to basically make sure we stock the big giant bag that they're going to helicopter up to each anchor, so we have everything we need. Is that how to drill a 20mm hole with a 13mm drill bit?
Same height, but a lot taller.
Wow, that's
That's the most shitty hole. The theory behind it is if you drill the hole off center, it weakens the bar less.
He's a German engineer. So
That's why I drilled it on
trust you.
purpose off center, of course. Who drills centered holes? Like,
We leave between 8 and 9.
So 10. Okay.
No.
Oh,
We leave
a Swedish 8 or 9.
Yeah. Who feels competent and stoked about going to the far side anchor or shitty rock side anchor to find a place to place a spool, how to put maybe complex bolts in because it's layered rock,
Yeah, our whole van was figuring on doing that.
Yeah.
Now, not everything just worked out smoothly on this project for us, but we were fortunate enough to have a drought or a heat wave that Abisko hasn't seen in many, many years, which means it was 65 and sunny for a couple days in a row. Our original plan was to de-rig, this is really funny in hindsight, to de-rig the Highline every time the wind picked up and re-rig it the next day, maybe get 1 or 2 walks in until we had to de-rig it because of the wind that was supposed to be there. Luckily, we didn't have to do that because it wasn't as easy as we thought.
Any change, please? Change?
So after a long 12-hour drive to finish getting to northern Sweden, Quidden and I felt like it was best to just start hiking immediately in order to find the anchor spot so the helicopter would know where to go the next day, because we had a very narrow window when this helicopter was willing to play ball with us, and we really, really needed them to take all of our gear up to each side. Okay, it's 11:30 at night, and we're ready to start hiking after 12 hours of driving. And we're not getting to use
That's
this.
the heli we're not gonna use.
But that's what it'll look like when it shows up tomorrow with all of our stuff. So we just wanted to make sure we knew what it looked like. How many hours? You think 6?
No, man, I think
You think we'll get up there
3.
before sunrise? All right, let's go.
Sunrise is happening.
Now, this location is known for wind, and so that was a major concern for if we could even rig this project. And when you have sponsors on the line and everyone's flowing to make this thing happen, and you all take a week off work, you really hope that you get this weather window. And supposedly we had it. Until that evening, while we hiked up, what felt like to a California boy felt like a hurricane. In Sweden, they probably just called that a light breeze. But in my mind, I thought we were going to die.
We have good news, guys. The good news is
And the entire time hiking up, we're trying to envision how we're even going to get the tagline down to the middle and connect one side to the other through these deadly scree fields. And so we came to the conclusion, instead of trying to break the news to everybody that it wasn't going to happen, that we would just let them do the 8-mile hike themselves to find out that this was just all gonna be a flop. Bear Grylls would be proud of us. I found a spot that's not in the wind and 3 flake rocks that made this flat-ish.
Yeah, it looks really flattish. A lot of space.
A lot of ish. This is where we're gonna end the night. In the daylight. Good night. So after our evening of defeat and finding a yet better flat spot to sleep in, with the sun shining directly into my eyes all night, we woke up to basically no wind, the sun, and pretty good weather.
Nice, you're halfway there?
Yeah, I think 2 hours, and we're up there. Something like that.
This is how not to Lapporten. We're gonna look for an anchor. Then the heli will drop us rope and anchor gear. Same on the other side. And we're gonna do it. Bon appetit.
And this might be a good spot to sleep, but it's not a good spot for an anchor. So as soon as we're done with breakfast, we're going to start hiking more and see what we can find. Okay, so I can't laser all the way across because it's really far. But to the creek that comes off this lake down here, it's 493 meters down and 1,286 meters that way. So, or 1,286 meters, you know, straight from where I'm looking at it. So Google Maps says this is 2.1. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. But we do need to go about 50 meters, maybe 100 meters higher, and ideally a more flat spot for the helicopter. So let's go.
We're still off level a little bit, but a tiny little bit, I reckon.
Should we go up there and see if...
Yeah.
So we just kind of build our anchor off of rock. This is a big rock we could just bolt into the side, wrap this, bury this, dead man that. Build a rock stack here. This boulder's not going to move. And then we can take the hang frame and stabilize it to the rock you're on, as level as we're going to find with a water bottle.
It looks super level. It says 2.126.
Maybe when the helicopter comes, they'll see like where it lands.
Yeah.
We were able to find a super flat enough spot for the helicopter. We finally got our supplies. We finally got a drink of water that we so desperately needed, as our water source was down the mountain. We didn't want to hike back up. The holes that will stabilize to a rock will bolt here and there, here for that direction.
So my first Highline experience.
Yeah, what are you up here for?
I'm gonna film for actually the Swedish national TV, a documentary.
Oh, that's awesome. What is it, 150 kilos? So we start to set up our anchor, and we bolt a couple of the rocks with some removable bolts. And the Petzer Core Pulse bolts that we use are the only bolts that I found do really require a very clean hole, especially when pulled in tension. Being that we really wanted to clean these holes, and we didn't really have a brush in the helicopter bag, we were kind of just using a stick to try to clean out the dust. And since we didn't have a straw, we tried to use the mixing nozzle as a straw to blow the dust out. Super good enough, right? How strong can these small rocks be anyways? So then we're gonna tie a BFK, or a big fat knot, having all these points connected. And the rope that we have available to us is a 8mm 12 braid Dyneema rope, which is supposed to be spliced and not really knotted. And we didn't really have any rope with us for anchor material. We were very, very limited on anchor material. So it was quite difficult to get our master point, or the thing that everything will be connected to, exactly where we wanted. So then we try to set up our hang frame, which is going to lift that master point off the ground so we can easily work on it. But it has to be stabilized at the bottom so the legs don't kick out and do the splits. The hole that we drilled back at camp wasn't quite big enough. And so if you are ever curious how strong the core versus the sheath is of a rope, well, those things are good to know when you have to pull the core out of the rope in order for it to fit inside of the hole. And then we kind of build this janky little rock stack in order to have a flat platform for the winch to sit on. However, the winch, being that it's going to be pulling all the webbing over, is going to see a high force. And so we found it to be a challenge in order to get that winch to not twist and turn and twerk or even flip upside down as we're cranking a lot of pressure on this thing.
Help me pull a little bit. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1.
Yeah.
Okay,
No, keep going. You gotta untorque it.
Is it torqued?
Yeah.
You sure?
This blue is going this way and that black thing is not.
Okay, 1, 2. Is it improving?
Yeah.
I don't like the sound the spool's doing.
This spool is making zero sounds. It's your rocks that are moving.
No, it's...
Yeah, it's...
I like it like that. Let's leave it like that.
Okay. What are you gonna do? It's 8 o'clock at night.
I have to go down there to the lake and come back. I'm not sure if I want to do this, but it's already too late.
All right, so you're spliced to 5mm Dyneema. So the 5mm goes through this rack up here, and then what are you doing over here? Bicycle brake.
Check it out.
He's holding you. I'll figure out an emergency system after you start. Now the rope that we had is 5mm 12 braid Dyneema. The problem is, it's the most slippery material that ropes are made out of. It is literally as slippery as Teflon. And so we have to use the brake that is attached to the spool in order for the spool to lock up to hold Greg going down this mountain. We found that no device that we had could grab this Dyneema rope. And if you stick an ascender on it, the teeth on an ascender will shred the rope at only 2 kilonewtons, which is approximately the force you're potentially playing with when you are lowering or pulling in the webbing. So we try to go as slow as possible, and we lower Greg as he's more or less down climbing this bouldery mountain. And after a long while, he finally gets down there. Now, the thing that is saving our bacon at this point is the walkie-talkies that we were using. Because without good communication, you can't tug on the rope in order to communicate a mile.
Greg, we tensioned the rope. Do you feel tension?
No, it's still pretty flat here.
Okay, that means it's stuck.
So the other thing going on is I think Matthias is ready to drone from the other side, and he's going to sacrifice one of his racing drones. They're just going to go out as far as they can with a weight. And David is at the river, the tip of the lake here. They're just going to fly it straight out the fishing line and then turn off, like, till the battery dies. And then just turn off the drone and let it fall. And then hopefully they can find it. Once our rope is unstuck, which Guerin is going to go down right now and do.
It's stuck.
then we're tagged. And really, like, that was the biggest crux considering we didn't get our helicopter.
Yeah, they found it, and now they're pulling down fishing line. Our tag line goes here. Their tag line will go here. We will connect them and then lift it all up.
So after hours of struggling, they finally get a rope from the top of the good side down to the middle of the lake where Greg was with our 5mm Dyneema. And then they connected it to a boulder that they built a temporary anchor on by wrapping it with some rope. And then we tensioned it from both sides. So then they could release that anchor and it would shoot high enough into the sky to not get stuck in the boulder fields on either side.
Welcome to tomorrow. Somebody has been working basically around the clock on this at all times, and they got the tagline from their side to our red line here. And so technically we are connected all the way across. Now I am touching rocks again on this side, but I tested it and it's moving. We have to notify the helicopters not to fly through our space now. And I got to figure out how to fit our little line scale 3 that we got to borrow, the prototype. Andy Riedrich mailed to us the prototype, which is super cool. We'll be able to see the forces on this. But yeah, we have to figure out how to get the capstan to pull in so much weight, because I don't know, the spool is great, but it just takes a lot of muscle to get it to go. We have to release the red rope so they can pull up their paracord, since that's not strong enough to pull over the webbing.
All right, we're gonna configure the pull.
How was your night last night?
It was short.
It was short.
Ryan was really pissed, so just picture the scene. Like, we opened the brand new box of the capstan, right?
Besides fuel, what do you think a brand new capstan might need?
Oil?
That's what we don't have.
Oh.
Now we have all hands on deck at this point in order to manually turn this spool with this wrench that Guerin also found in the garbage, like many of the parts in the spool. Where'd you get that bike brake?
Got it from the trash, guys. The same wrench that I got here, like that one was slipping, right?
Yeah,
You know where I got those from?
the garbage. We even had the cameraman who was just there to film, helping us spool this Highline in.
We got the Polish guy now directing German slaves. I think it is appropriate for all the shit they make.
Dude, how high are we? Like, it feels a lot tighter now.
You could only get it so far before it was literally even too difficult that way. A capstan is like a winch that's one-sided. You wrap a rope 3 or 4 or 5 times around it, depending on the diameter, and you just slightly pull the back of the rope, and the friction from the drum will winch your rope in. We had no oil for our capstan, so we talked about putting coconut oil. We talked about putting water in it. We didn't care if we destroyed it. We just had to get the webbing across. We just needed it to work for a little bit. We just were not able to figure out how to use this, and we realized we had to make this thing work. Guess what a generator has? So we kind of charged everything we had to charge, and then we cleaned out a noodle box so we could be as careful as possible to get it into our capstan. So we're in luck. We finally have oil in our capstan. We're gonna be able to use this thing, except we can't get the motor to turn on. Guess what? There's a prime button. We finally were able to get the capstan turned on We wrapped it 5 or 6 times around the thing.
Ow! We did it!
And then we spooled the tail of the rope so we were able to keep the rope nice and tidy, putting just enough pressure on the capstan so the capstan could do all of the heavy lifting. We finally get the webbing started. And now we get to the Z-drag. Did you know if you rub webbing intended for friction on all these pipes, they get hot? So someone was literally in charge of putting snow inside of these pipes in order to keep it cool enough to not get so hot that it would melt the webbing. Now it's pretty scary at this point to have all the force on the capstan because you can't put an ascender on the rope as a backup because it would shred the rope, and you've got quite a bit of force. And so the capstan's getting hot, Dyneema has a low melting point, and it takes hours of this obnoxious motor your ear is right next to in order to get the webbing all the way to us. And we're talking hours goes by and you cannot even see the webbing. You cannot even see the people on the other side. The distance to the other anchor is literally 2 El Capitans away. And if you've ever been at the top of El Capitan, people are real small. So if you were on top of 2 El Capitans, you wouldn't see them at all. It's been 3 hours of pulling already, I think, and I can't even see the webbing. We might be halfway, I don't know. So you should have seen our faces when we finally saw the webbing approach us, and it was visible after hours of pulling, after 2 days of thinking this was just not gonna get rigged after reason after reason after reason. Hey, look what we got. Very excited. So now we got some teeth on it. We have to pull it in a little to get it through the capstan so we can pull it some more. Ready to pull another 200 meters? What's for dinner?
Well, tonight we're gonna have some lentil curry and rice with tofu. It's gonna be amazing.
It's pretty nice. And what was cool is we had the Line Scale 3 prototype. This is before the Line Scale 3 was even out and released. There was only, I think, one in the world at this point, and Andy Riedrich loaned it to us so we could use it on this project because the forces involved on a 2-kilometer long Highline is fascinating. So let me tell you about this Sky Diamond webbing from Spider Slacklines. It is called high-tech webbing. It was made out of Dyneema. So it is super, super light, which is nice when you have so much of it hanging out there. Problem with Dyneema, as we're learning in this video, is it's very slippery. So nothing quite grabs it. And so we need to be able to grab it in order to connect the loop into our master point. Problem is, we're putting grip after grip after grip, and we just cannot hold the tension with these grips on this material. And so we ended up butting the grips up against the sewn part of the loop in order to get just enough force on there. And you can't really tie a backup because it's tight. So it's really scary that you're going to lose this webbing out into the abyss that you just spent 2 days getting pulled across. So then we finally rig it. And we did what every standard Highline procedure is to forget the rings. However, we put this leash here so we wouldn't forget. Damn it.
Like always.
You warned us. Now the next giant step in this process is to tension the Highline. But before we had a chance to do that, we heard this voo, 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 voo. And everyone was looking around for this sound. We had called in a NOTAM, or a notice to airmen. There were supposed to be no things flying in the sky while we had this airspace reserved. And we saw the helicopter, and no one breathed for a minute. So from our perspective, it's really hard to determine distance and height and things like that. And we see the helicopter basically flying directly into the Highline. You can't cut it down fast enough. It literally takes over a minute for the webbing to fall to the ground. There's just so much webbing. And then maybe they do see the Highline and they're gonna go above or below it. And if you make it unpredictable, then you're gonna get your stuff caught up in the blades. So we just felt like our hands were tied and we just watched. And we were just scared out of our minds. And this thing, I bet you, was within 30 meters of this webbing, and they flew underneath it between the ground and the webbing, which there was probably only 100 meters between the ground and the webbing because it was so saggy. And we were like upset, like somebody's called the helicopter center. What the hell? What if somebody was on the Highline? Now you're afraid not only of the wind, but of things flying into you. That got my heart going.
We would have had to re-rig tomorrow again. Another shitty day like this. That would have been horrible.
After they die?
That's why we have sectioned lines.
When helicopters hit it, it says 2.8, okay? Quidden, test it for us. And now it says 2.6.
How strange is that, man? How strange is that?
If somebody got on that side, it would actually increase the force on our side. Time to actually finally tension the Highline, which they are going to do from the good side because they have more people and a good side to do it from. The problem is it's so much work that in an ideal world, you would have both sides with a tensioning system and both sides spending the hours it takes to tension the Highline. But it was getting late and we couldn't do anything about it on our side of the anchor, so we had to just wait. And they tensioned it a lot, but not quite enough. But Quidden, who's been antsy about this project, really wanting to get this world record, been training for a long time, super eager, and tries to get on in the middle of the night to get on this Highline, which has pros and cons with people sleeping. Not a lot we can do to help him if something goes wrong, but it's nice to have people awake if you're gonna be out on a line for 3 hours. So from the comfort of my tent while I am trying to sleep in the middle of the night with the sun shining in my eyes, I'm filming Quidden trying to stand up and walk a 2.1 kilometer long Highline. And keep in mind, Quidden's a badass. This guy can crush, and he couldn't even take 2 steps. Do you want my gloves, man?
No, it's fine.
This is too steep. It goes down 150 meters.
Yeah, just hit my balls really bad. No, tell them I'm slipping.
Dude, you need 6.5, bro.
Yeah. Can you ask them to tension, please?
So he finally goes to bed, tries to get his stoke up for the next day. There is so much pressure to only get 1 try because other people want to walk. The weather window's narrow. It's a miracle we even rigged this. This is your moment you've been training for, and it doesn't happen very often. And you go to stand up, and you look like I did in 2006. Quidden couldn't even stand. And I was like, I don't know this guy very long, but I know he can do better than this. And he kept trying and kept trying and kept trying, and we're like, something's not right. And so Greg pops his head over the edge and goes, why don't you extend the backup? There's no loops in the first segment, the segment that's closest to us. Now the rest of the Highline looks pretty good, and we had no material except for this one giant span set. There's a phenomenon that happens on 2 kilometers. When you walk, you can wiggle all you want and the energy will dissipate. It cannot go to the other side and back. It just is not enough energy. And so the only movement you're really gonna get on a 2 kilometer is the movement that wind generates. And we had a pretty good still day. But if your backup is tight, that thing is like trying to stand on a Bronco that doesn't want you on it. That thing hits that first segment and shoots the energy back at you and out towards the 2 kilometer at the same time. And it just kicks, and you correct that, and it gets harder and harder and harder, and it is almost impossible to walk. And so by doing what Greg suggested and adding this extender to the backup, Quidden was able to stand up. He got 2 steps, then 5 steps, and then he was past the first segment, which is the tightest, or feels the tightest, and is the most wobbly for sure. More towards the middle, it becomes more cruisy, even though it's still really, really, really hard. Okay, Cesare, we're at 7.36. I officially cannot see Kieran anymore. I believe he's halfway. He's a little red dot. That's amazing. The middle 600 meters, or almost 2,000 feet, the highliner on this line cannot be seen by either side. You don't know if they are injured. You don't know if they're doing well. You don't even know if they fell, because the energy your little body puts on such a big line gets dissipated before it would hit the anchor. It's unlikely that we would even notice a whip in the middle of the line. So we have no communication with them without them communicating with us. They do have a walkie-talkie on them, but it's off, or it's on a separate channel so we don't interrupt their mental flow, as Kieran is walking on this highline for 3 hours with his arms up for 3 hours, and you try to like shake one out and you try to lower one and you try to stay focused, and it gets harder and harder and harder the closer you get, not just because you're tired, because the mental agony of the fact that you are doing well. It's called send anxiety. It's where you try to trick your brain into not get excited about the fact that you might send the line or cross it entirely, and in doing so, getting too excited and screwing up and falling. So then your brain is telling you not to fall, which is a very not a good way to think. You want to think positive and think that you can do it. You don't want to think don't fall. You want to think stand up, and you're playing all these mental games, and it is literally just your body is shaking out of just 3 hours of flow state in this adrenaline flowing through your body. Very few sports can give you this much adrenaline for this long in order to stay just perfectly balanced and stay focused. It's been an hour and 45 minutes and the other side still cannot see him, and we are struggling to see him. Our side is gaining more tension the further away he gets, and the other side is getting less tension, all within 5% of each other. I'm pretty excited. I didn't think we were ever going to get even this far, let alone last night it was too steep, too slippery. This morning he fell 5 or 6 times here at the beginning because the backup wasn't right. He's just like, ugh. But we keep overcoming the obstacles, and we'll find out if he overcomes the emotional one he's in right now.
Can you talk about the danger of doing this?
So right now it's not technically dangerous. We have 6 or 7 anchor points here. They have similar things over there. What's dangerous is the conditions can change quickly. And let's say he gets fatigue in the middle, because we couldn't see him and the other side couldn't see him. So if he tried to pull his phone out and drops it to tell us he needs help, then 5 hours would go by before we even know that we have to go rescue him. So the distance is what makes this dangerous. So we finally get a news update from the good anchor, and they tell us they can see Kieran and that he's still crushing, that he's still doing well, and then they keep giving us notice that he's closer, and then they give us notice that he's really close, and then we hear nothing for like 45 minutes. I don't know why they're not. It's usually really obvious when somebody gets it. There's a lot of hugging and a lot of screaming, and I don't know if there's either one going on right now. So he finally gets the last few steps and sits down right at the end of the safe zone there, and it erupts apparently on that side, and people are crying and everyone's excited and the hugs are starting. And we're over on our side twiddling our thumbs going, well, did he make it? That is the weirdest part of a 2-kilometer long highline, is it's so disconnected from what's happening on the other side.
Yeah, made it, guys. We have a world record.
Yeah! And so We finally were told the good news. We were excited. I felt a huge pressure of relief that we accomplished what we came to accomplish. And anybody else who walks it at this point is just a cherry on top. Even though it's still amazing if they do it, it just takes all the pressure off. If somebody finally sends the line. This project is complete at this point. We just gotta make sure we all go home alive.
Wow, well that takes the pressure off of you.
this.
Yeah, so now you can walk without all that emotional pressure.
I didn't expect that we rigged this and even sand it. That's crazy.
I was pretty hopeless 2 minutes into the hike. Wow, good job, Quidden.
German machine. German technology.
He works better than his spool.
So now on our side it's 6.07.
I have 5.6, 5.7. I think the tension might be less over here because we're creating less of an angle. Might be an angle issue more than like weight distribution. There you go.
Oh, fuck. Sorry for swearing. Just
You have a good excuse, man. You're tired.
I walked 1,700 meters so beautifully, so confident. And after one fall, it was one after the other. And that makes you tired.
How are you feeling?
I'm quite okay. I just woke up, so we will see. I'm still a bit sleepy.
Smart.
It is.
How much do you have in here? Are these shoes?
I have my shoes and down jacket.
Nice.
Well, how are you guys? Oh, it's great. It's good to be here.
What do you think of our line?
Looks pretty sick. Good anchor, actually. My Swedish summer skis on. Got my dishes so I can go down to the river.
Oh, wow, dude! How'd you do?
Okay, I mean the first 200 meters was like a hell, but after that it was pure fun.
Good job, bud. We're just doing dishes over here and starting dinner. You want to show us your party trick?
Colors so that you can see me.
But the mountain's sloped. How are you going to base jump?
Well, just before I got here, my nice friends, they installed a line that I can base jump off in the middle safely with no walls nearby.
Is safely the right word or just like...
As safe as the base jump off a Highline gets.
It actually, I believe that. That is the safest you're going to get.
It's a span. It's a span. It has tons of exposure.
Lizzie is 275 meters-ish. And you see there's a little white dot right there? That little white dot right there is Ruben. Also walking a line at 10 o'clock at night.
And after I was a bit tired, but yeah, it was like one of the best walk of my life. It's amazing, really.
Ci hai messo 1 ora e 40 più o meno.
Nice! 1 hour and 40.
Wow!
There was the drone of Emil, really calm, you know, around me. And I started to hear like... And then he was like going around me behind everything, and I was like, yeah, okay, but to keep a good flow because it's and that was super nice, like with these things that was flying around. That was crazy. Today I sit on a lake of a snowfield that I was able just to say like this, and but you know, we are savages, wild people here, wild.
Okay, so it's getting a bit windy. We're at 8.5 kilonewtons with just one person on it. Ruben was walking at the same time Lizzie was on it, and it was still in the 8 range. But it's probably 100 meters of side sag, and I think 100 meters of sag sag. And Lizzie said when Ruben was on it that it was humping different than when she was on it alone. And humping is when webbing goes back and forth because the energy just travels through the line different on such large things like this. It's midnight, in case you can't tell. And then I think Fredy's gonna try base jumping in the morning off the center of the line.
Oh man, the struggle is real.
How hard can it be, man?
How hard can it be?
Yeah.
I don't know, let me look. This is the original vortex that I have. And this is so Freddy can take it off, put it in his pocket, and then jump down with his leash so it's out of everyone's way. Why is your bulge so big, bud?
Because I have something important in there. A harness. Because I actually need to walk the Highline first, and I can't attach the leash to my parachute harness. So first comes the little harness with the leash. It's inside my pants to not interfere with the parachute rig. And then eventually in the middle, I'm gonna take the leash off and like stuff it in there and just focus on the parachute.
Have fun, Freddy. Oh shit. Pitch, man, pitch. Oh my god. He rotated a lot. Yeah, he wasn't supposed to turn that many times.
Did you see how many twists he did? Did you see how late he opened it?
So he finally leans forward and we notice he's flipping, which is okay a little bit, but if you flip too much and your stomach is towards the sky when you throw your parachute out, what can happen is you could fall into your parachute, and if it doesn't open, you can die. And we notice he flips again, and he flips again, and he flips again. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's pretty close to the ground, because it is very difficult to determine distance and height from that far away. And his parachute opens like 30 meters above the ground. And he was able to pitch and open his parachute with the right rotation, and he lands safely on the ground, which we're all real excited about that he made it. It just took this project to a whole new level, and we were able to capture the force with the line scale 3 in the system with him on it and then instantly not on it anymore.
How was it?
Yeah, it was pretty intense.
Holy fuck.
Pretty intense, guys. Yeah, and he opened like the I don't know.
Just topple over.
My brain saying, shouldn't it open already?
Yeah, like we were all in silence looking like, oh my god. Wow! When we saw the yellow things, we were like, thanks God.
Made the split-second decision to rather pull 2 seconds earlier than waiting to be 100% stable. So I pulled in a like awkward position, but early enough to be really like high above the ground.
Could you tell when you were facing the sky or the ground, or were you disoriented?
No, I could tell what was happening. I knew
Okay.
I was doing front flips, and I knew kind of what was happening, and I even knew kind of the delay. I tried counting seconds in my head, and I thought I pulled after 6, and video revealed that I pulled after 6 or 7.
Okay. You were in exposure a while.
Dude, the baseline walking felt incredible, amazing, thrilling, mind-blowing. Yes.
A parachute in case it doesn't work out?
No, I don't have a parachute.
Oof.
I depend on my own walking skills. But I probably prefer that.
Well, have fun.
Yeah.
You got a nice S shape to work with.
Yeah, it's a nice little curve. I mean, it's definitely gonna be a walk to remember whatever happens. So I'll be psyched.
Now, to give you perspective, I did not even try to cross this entire thing. I slid out past the first 50 meters because that part's not fun to walk, and I tried walking the next 2 segments and struggled. It is a very difficult thing to do. And I know myself, my limitations, and the fact that I don't want to be rescued because it's very difficult to do that. I just chose to enjoy a piece of the line. So it was amazing that 4 people sent the Highline without any falls, and a whole handful of people crossed this Highline with falls, which honestly is also quite difficult because you got to stand back up and keep going. And if you're going to spend 2 or 3 hours walking a slackline continuously with really no exit plan if you decide to just be done, it's an amazing feat that anybody can get across this thing.
Okay, so it's the next morning and it's time to de-rig. And hopefully we don't destroy the webbing, but I'll start with my tent here. Okay, let me explain the de-rig process before we're knee deep in this. So we have our rack here, and it's going to go to our carabiner, which is going to hold our entire load right here. And once we release this soft release, then all the load's going to be on this guy. And then once this is tight, and this is going to, how many wraps did you do?
6, I think.
6. And we have the bicycle brake on the spool. So this is anchored to the American Death Square. And
bolted only to one
small boulder. Yeah. Okay, held up by our plastic boxes. So redirected through here, which is just a part of our string anchor, which we have 3 string anchors going. We're going to be sending all of the webbing down to the team that will be down there. The helicopter is going to pick up all the webbing down here, and this way that side doesn't have to pull it all in. They're actually going to release as well. We're going to release in tandem in order to hopefully preserve this from rubbing and only our taglines get compromised.
Tension will stay high for a while. Like 10 meters out, we will still have the same tension. 50 meters out, it will start to drop, I guess.
Okay, because
slowly.
You put a heavy bag in the middle to...
In order to get the webbing to the other side, because it should not get stuck here in the...
I don't think that's a valid test, Quidden.
Pull the line.
Are you Polish?
Now, it's not real possible for the other side to pull the webbing back in. We don't really have another winch. We don't have another capstan that's going to pull in the webbing with all those connections and all those loopity-loops. So we basically have to lower both sides with the rope that they use to temporarily go down to the ground and our rope, and just lower the webbing down to the middle and try not to rub it on too much stuff. Not ideal on such a nice piece of webbing, but that's what we had to work with. The problem came when we were trying to manage lowering this rope that you really can't grab. And what happened is we wanted to take just one loop off. Never try to unwrap a capstan under load. Greg almost lost his finger. What happened was you have to give slack on the back end in order to take the tail off one loop. And we didn't capture it on camera because there's a lot going on. And it happened in an instant. And it just went, and it came off because there was slack behind and it's trying to get the tension again.
Stop. Stop. Okay, so I tried to unwrap one wrap on here and the whole thing exploded. This flew backwards. Greg's hand got cut. The handle flipped off. And the only thing now holding this is the brake, which we had to jump for. It happened fast.
Yeah, it happened fast. But somehow I found the bike brake and stopped everything. The amp steel has also been sliding very quickly through the cave racks and the other lowering devices we had, generating heat on those. And Dyneema has a very low melting point. So we just pushed the limit on the melting point of this Dyneema. We're trying to let it out slowly so the same Dyneema isn't touching the same hot metal all the way through. And we finally get this thing under control. We basically just use the bicycle brake for the remainder of the lowering. If it was a normal rope, you'd be able to put it through a gree-gree, for example, or a couple of them, or some ATCs, or those cave racks actually would have done some actual good. But straight up Dyneema made the de-rigging process very, very risque.
We're not worried about this holding the force anymore because luckily it's stuck in the rocks down there. Lucas and Benjamin are going down. Oh, but good news. Luckily the bag over there, that's 80 kilograms, is stuck halfway down a cliff. So it's not just us holding everybody up. We have good news. We're done up here. Yep. I got this one. What's the bad news, Quidden? What's the condition of the webbing?
The good news is that it's not our webbing.
That's the good news. So the webbing is laying from approximately here all the way on the ground, all the way to about here. But everyone's got their taglines and we're now cleaning up the anchors.
Yay! For lunch we've got
mosquitoes for protein, raisins. I think those are quick carbs. And then we got a hell of a lot of coiling, webbing.
For dessert?
For
You guys, we have a first world problem. Our helicopter won't come until tomorrow morning, which sounds like a first world problem, but in fact, we're quite upset about it. We have to carry 7 people's worth of camping gear down tonight, and this has the potential of getting rained on, so we have to problem solve that. It's just, I guess our mindset was we would just walk down with like a water bottle. Good news, we can still walk down with that water bottle.
yeah, and 7 more.
7 extra ones. That's an update on how D-Rig's going. Oh, by the way, they're not even half done unstucking the webbing down there. If we go slow, do you think we have to help?
No. So we get down pretty tired, pretty bit up, and pretty haggard, and finally get to town and get a hot shower before having dinner. The entire next day, it dumps and rains and storms, and we literally got to use the second the weather got good to the second it stopped being good. And everyone got to walk on this Highline that wanted to. We even got to squeeze in a base jump off of it. So when you see a big, giant, beautiful Highline in the sky and soft music with the sunset behind the Highliner, and you're in awe of the fact that people even do this, now you know what's involved in making a project like this actually happen. Check out the full feature film that Emil Sergel with Pinewood Productions put out on this project that he's been working on for the last year, that is going to be featured on Swedish TV and hopefully featured in some film festivals. That film is a beautiful mixture of everyone's stories combined into one. Be sure to dream big, learn your gear so you can push the limits of them, and know that nothing's easy.
You know what I think when I see a gap like that? We should put a piece of plastic between it and tell the whole world about it. That's what we just did. Thanks for watching.
You're dealing with yourself, you're dealing with your fears, you're facing all your doubts, and it teaches you how to stay calm, face those things, and keep on walking.
The Lapporten Project is the attempt of rigging a Highline over Lapporten.
It's gonna be the record line. It's like, it's made for that.
A lot of things can go wrong, and you're very much on your own in that situation.
This spot, it's really like, it's demoralizing. It's devastating. This thing is destroying your mind.
You guys just see him from your side? We lost sight of him a while ago.
Hold that, hold that. Are you taking a picture? When? Right, yeah. I'm taking 25s every second. All right. 1, 2, 3.